Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to session number 43 of our course of Organizational Theory and Design. And as you know, we were discussing about the globalization happening in companies and how they have responded to this notion of globalization. And we were discussing that companies go from a purely domestic focus to an international focus with an export department, and then they continue growing if they want to take interest in foreign sales, and they can become multinational companies, and ultimately they can become global organizations. But today we will focus on the companies which are interested in global operations, but our discussion topic would be the structural design or the structural dimensions around which these companies organize themselves when they go for global operations. So basically, when companies are engaged in global operations, they either go for a true globalization strategy or they go for a multi-domestic strategy. Now, what is the difference between these two strategies? We will try to clarify it to you with the help of a few examples. Globalization strategy. When we say that a company is pursuing a globalization strategy, that means that the product design and the advertising strategies are standardized throughout the world. Take the example of Japanese cars, for example. Without taking name of any brand, just taking the example of Japanese cars, and if we focus on what happened during 60s, 70s, and 80s in the auto markets in the world, we encounter that Japanese came up with standardized product designs, and they had a very, very similar advertising strategy for these cars. They were promoted as fuel-efficient, economical cars, and yet small cars, but meant for families. So this positioning of Japanese cars was nearly global. So that means that advertising strategy was standardized. Product design, assembly operations were also standardized. But there are certain other examples where a multi-domestic strategy or a multi-domestic focus is used by companies which are engaged in global operations. And a multi-domestic focus would mean that competition in each country is handled independently. This multi-domestic focus will encourage a product design, assembly, and marketing which is tailored to the specific needs of that particular country. Like the example which I gave for Japanese cars, and we were very clear in highlighting that these Japanese cars did not take into account which country they are targeting their product or where they are having their production operations, because they use the same product design techniques and the same advertising strategy was used throughout the world. But there are certain products where this cannot happen. For example, generally, orange juice is considered as a drink for breakfast. And any company which is in global operations has all the right to position orange juice as a breakfast product because it is consumed around the world as a breakfast drink. But in France, people don't drink orange juice in breakfast. So if you are pursuing a multi-domestic focus strategy in France and you are selling orange juice, then you will not be positioning it as a breakfast drink in France, because the norms or the culture of the France or whatever the reason is, generally the French people will not accept orange juice as a breakfast drink. Similarly, in Mexico, detergents are used to wash dishes and not clothes. So all around the world, detergents are meant for washing clothes. But in Mexico, people use detergent to wash dishes. So these country or geographical or regional differences, when they are taken into account in the issues of marketing and production and product design and assembly, then in spite of being global, the strategy would be called as a multi-domestic strategy because it has a domestic focus in it. And this is in stark contrast to the globalization strategy which we discussed, where the product design, the assembly, the marketing strategy, the advertising strategies, they are all standardized across the world. And the dilemma facing the international organization is generally when to use a globalization strategy and when to use a multi-domestic strategy. And that is precisely what I want to highlight by giving you a framework on the board which will clarify which strategy is to be used where, and similarly which corresponding structure needs to be used there. So this model will actually describe how the structure fits with the international advantages. So if we take two variables, because it's a framework, so we will be taking two variables, one along the y-axis and the other along the x-axis. And if we take forces for national responsiveness on this axis, national responsiveness, which will mean basically means the domestic forces. Are they low or are they high if they run in this direction? As compared to forces for global integration. So which means globalization or globalization strategy. So global integration could be low and it could be high. So we get a typical 4-cell framework which gives us 4 scenarios. We can have a scenario where national responsiveness is high along with a high global integration. Here we will generally be using both globalization as well as multi-domestic strategies, because not only that the global integration forces are high, but also the national responsiveness or the domestic touch is also important. We cannot ignore it. So we will use a mixture of globalization and multi-domestic strategy, and the structure which we will use will be a global matrix structure. After describing this framework, I'll briefly describe on the board what is how a global matrix structure is arranged. And we can have a situation where the forces for global integration are high, but the national responsiveness needs are low, like the example which I gave for Japanese cars. Here we will purely use a strategy of globalization, and the structure will be a global product structure, not a global matrix, because as you understand, matrix creates a mix of two elements, product as well as technical elements. Whereas a global product structure is purely around the product. So here it will also take care of the, I'll show you when I'll draw it here, it will show you the influence, how functions are interacting with the product. The technical and product attributes both are mixed in matrix, whereas here only the product structure is required because there is no need for national responsiveness. Or we can have a situation where both global integration and national responsiveness forces are low. Here we will use export strategy instead of a purely globalization strategy or a multi-domestic strategy. Here we will use export strategy, and the structure will have an international division. Rather than having a global product structure or a global matrix structure, an international division will be added to the functions of the company, and that will be enough because both forces of domestic as well as global integration are low. And if the national responsiveness forces are high and global integration forces are low, then we will use a multi-domestic strategy purely, and the structural type will be a global geographical structure rather than a global product structure, because here we are now considering the differences in the countries. Therefore, we will use a global geographic structure. We cannot treat a multi-domestic strategy cannot be fulfilled by treating the companies across the board as similar, because if that is the case, then we will be using a globalization strategy, and global product structures will be helpful. But here we are recognizing the geographical and regional differences among countries or regions. Therefore, we will use a global geographical structure. So this model tells us how international companies fit their operations and strategies with their structures. And since we have talked about global matrix, so it might confuse, I don't want you to get confused because you already have a nice notion of the matrix structure, which I don't want to disturb in your minds. But quickly, when we discuss matrix, we said that matrix is a combination of functional structure. For example, marketing, accounts, finance, R&D, production, and on one side we had the various matrix heads like maybe engineering or construction or electrical, and these bosses plus these bosses are interacting like this, and this creates a matrix. The concept is very similar when we talk about a global matrix. Global matrix will have a headquarters somewhere, and then it will have the functions of marketing, R&D, accounts, production. But instead of having separate matrix field areas, we will have countries here, maybe Japan, for example, or France, or say China. So now each country is taking care of functions as they are coming from the headquarters. So the globalization part of the strategy is coming from the headquarters, whereas the local touches are coming from these people who are sitting as country heads. The country heads and the global functional parts of the structure, they interact to create a global matrix which fulfill the demands of a strategy where both globalization and multi-domestic forces are at work. So this model gives you an idea how the international advantages are made to fit with the strategy of the international companies. Now, we move away, and now we don't move away from globalization concept, but we move further, because we have already discussed what is an international company, what is a multi-domestic focus, what is a globalization strategy, what is a multinational company, and what is a global company. Now we are moving towards a model which is called transnational model. By the way, transnational is a fastly coming up notion, or a fastly coming up a trendy way of describing the operations of companies which are spread around the world. This model of organizational structure goes beyond the global matrix structure. Because global matrix structure, you can see that it limits you to two functions basically, the country heads and interacting with the functions of the company. Whereas this structure tries to take the companies beyond the structural constraints, and it applies the concept of learning organization to huge, complex international corporations. Now that is a recent thinking, because generally when we talk about learning organizations, when the concept of learning organization actually started, it started off with small companies, small to medium-sized companies. Because if we quickly remember, or if we quickly recall the characteristics of a learning organization, then we would notice that a learning organization is the one which is headed by a leadership which is visionary. It has a flat horizontal structure. Employees work in teams. There is a strong focus for knowledge sharing. There is a strong value of trust. The top management strongly believes in the capabilities and potential of their people, and they encourage them to come up with ideas, and they learn from their mistakes. So it is a very organic, highly organic organization. Therefore, the notion of this type of structure fitting in large, huge, complex organization is new. Because in small companies, in medium-sized companies, it is easy to create that teamwork spirit or that teamwork culture, because top management directly influences the culture of the company. But when company grows huge, then it is a real challenge to retain that learning organization touch in it. But if that is done, then we are moving towards the transnational model. It is, as I said, a very, very recent thinking about the kind of structures needed by complex organizations. This model cannot be given a precise definition, but the following elements distinguish it from and move it beyond a matrix. As I've already said, that it is beyond a matrix structure. So what are those elements which distinguish this transnational model so sharply from a global matrix structure? There are four elements basically. The first of these elements is that transnational model differentiates into many centers of different kinds, and not one headquarter like we saw in a matrix structure, that you have a headquarter, down below that headquarter then you have various countries, and then there are the projects or products. The product managers are interacting with country managers, and everything is overseen by a headquarter. Here, in transnational model, there are many centers, not one center, and this is called flexible centralization. This is not the true centralization which the matrix is trying to develop through a single headquarter, but there are various centers which oversee the functions of different company units which come under them, and they create a flexible centralization. Second thing is that subsidiary managers or local managers, they initiate strategy. Now in global matrix structure, the strategy is usually initiated from the headquarters. Here, it is the opposite. It is a bottoms-up approach. Domestic or local managers initiate the strategy and innovations that become strategy for the corporation as a whole. So this is a bottom-up approach in strategy making, and it is very close to the descriptive schools of strategizing, where the strategy is not something which is pre-planned or deliberate or very ready to use. The strategy keeps on emerging. There is no hard, fast date fixed for a strategy to emerge. Like mostly the large companies have their planning departments, and they come up with yearly strategies, and then they come up with plans which are loaded with timetables and exact dates. Over here, that does not happen. The strategy is initiated down below, and the people who are initiating the strategy, they don't even know that they are initiating a strategy. They come up with a suggestion. They come up with an idea, and since they are local people, so their suggestions and ideas are explored. They are investigated, and if found within the reach or resources of the company, they are adopted. This process of adoption of ideas of local people becomes the strategy of the company for that particular region, or maybe for the whole of the company. So we can see that the strategy making process in a transnational model is very different from what we have seen traditionally, where the strategy comes up from the top. Here the strategy continuously builds from the bottom, and it is always hit and trial. It is always there is a scope for further learning, always there is a scope for further improvement, so strategy is not fixed. So that is one important distinguishing point between the transnational model and the global matrix structure. The third thing which differentiates transnational model from the global matrix structure is that the unification and coordination are achieved through corporate culture and not through hierarchy. Because when you try to unite people or when you try to coordinate them through structures, then the constraint of size then comes in. Because imagine, you're trying to control people through a hierarchy. Now, you cannot do that if the organization is too large, too complex. I mean, if it is large, huge, but it is purely mechanistic, the environment is very stable, what was in practice, say, 40, 50 years ago, then it was possible to control people with hierarchy. But now, when the environment is complex, turbulent, dynamic, when the company operations are huge, complex, then hierarchy cannot control people. But still you need unification. You don't need to actually control them, but you need to unite them. You need to give them a shared vision. You need to give them shared values, and you need to coordinate them. So if these things are not done by vertical hierarchy, then in transnational model, the unification and the coordination is occurring through the culture, through the shared vision, through the values of the companies, through the management style, rather than through vertical hierarchy. So that is a major conceptual difference between the transnational model and the global matrix structure. Because global matrix structure, as we have already seen on the board, it tries to control by creating a hierarchy, because 50% of global structure is actually functional structure. And functional structure is typically controlling through hierarchy. Over here, no such attempt will be made, because the focus is on learning rather than on controlling. But लर्निंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का ही एक इम्पॉर्टेंट तरीन हिस्सा है कोऑर्डिनेट करना लोगों को, बिकॉज टीम स्पिरिट इज अ बेसिक फोकस ऑफ लर्निंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. सो पीपल आर कोऑर्डिनेटेड in such transnational models through peer pressure, through norms of the companies, through traditions of the companies, through the rites and the rituals of the companies. So if you remember correctly, what we discussed in the management control systems, and we talked about 3 types of controls: the market controls, the bureaucratic controls, and the clan controls. Now over here in transnational model, the bureaucratic controls will not work because of the nature of the companies. They are so huge and the operations are so complex that they cannot be controlled through bureaucracy alone. So they would need clan controls. And clan controls, you will remember, are about the controls which are set up by the culture of the company, which are not set up by the hierarchy, or which are not set up only by the top management, but the culture is based on values and norms which are shared by all the members of that company. And that is the beauty of a learning organization. The fourth element which distinguishes transnational model from other model is that alliances are established with each other and with other company parts and with other companies as well. Because here the competitors are not perceived as a threat. Competitors are perceived as strategic partners. Competitors are perceived as your friends and not foes. That is also a philosophical difference in the approach of this transnational model. Now recently, there has been a lot of talk about empowerment. And in the context of globalization, the need for empowerment and the trend towards empowerment has definitely changed, and empowerment is gaining popularity. The notion of empowerment is gaining popularity. And not that empowerment was not used before globalization, but now the need for empowerment is even more. Now that is a strange remark or a strange sentence, that why would globalization need more empowerment? Because it would seem on the surface that globalization would perhaps mean a standardized strategy and more control over global operations. Therefore, maybe perhaps it will require more control. But it does not, because empowerment is not a zero-sum game. इसको मैं थोड़ा सा आपको एक्सप्लेन करूं कि जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के अंदर पावर है, दैट इज जनरल परसेप्शन इज कि अगर मेरी पावर कम होगी तो किसी और की बढ़ जाएगी, या अगर मेरी पावर ज्यादा होगी तो किसी की पावर के एक्सपेंस पे होगी. ऐसा ही है ना कॉन्सेप्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में, दैट इफ सम A's power increases, then it can be on the expense of the power of B, C or D. And it gives the impression as if the power in organization is a zero-sum game. But it is not. क्योंकि जब हम empower करते हैं लोगों को, तो हम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की टोटल पावर को इंक्रीज कर देते. Let me take you to the board again because that will perhaps make it a bit more clear for you. Empowerment से हमारी मुराद क्या है? And I have just said that in companies normally the perception of the managers, the perception of the employees is, for example, हम बात कर रहे हैं power की, and this is top management's power, and this is the middle management's power, and this is the lower management, and then the workers, the employees. So this is, let's call it P1, P2, P3, P4, and the total power of the company will be the summation of P1, P2, P3, and P4. Now, if the situation was like I discussed shortly when I introduced this concept, अगर हमने P2 ये पावर बढ़नी है, but this increase will mean a decrease in P1, then we are talking about a zero sum game. फर्ज करें इन पावर के यूनिट्स अगर हम बना लें फर्जी तौर पे, 8 यूनिट इन इस पावर के हैं, 6 इनके हैं, 4 इनके हैं और 2 इनकी. So now the total power will be 8 plus 6 plus 4 plus 2, which means 14, 18 and 20. So 20 units, एक arbitrary सी example है, power के हैं इस company. And if that company empowers the middle management, which means it gives them more power, तो इसका मतलब ये होगा कि अब middle management की पावर शायद 8 हो गई है, लेकिन ट्रेडिशनल कॉन्सेप्ट के मुताबिक टॉप मैनेजमेंट की पावर अब 6. तो जब आप इसे ऐड करेंगे फिर 20 का 20 रहेगा. तो दैट इज व्हाट आई मेंट बाय अ जीरो सम गेम, कि किसी की पावर बढ़ेगी तो किसी की कम हो जाएगी. तो टोटल पावर ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन विल स्टे द सेम, बट इट डज नॉट हैपन दैट वे, बिकॉज व्हेन वी एम्पावर पीपल, तो हम अपनी पावर को तो कम नहीं कर रहे. वी आर नॉट डिक्रीजिंग आवर पावर, वी आर गिविंग देम मोर स्किल्स, more opportunities to decide. We are giving them more training, and then we are giving them that empowerment. So हम इनकी पावर को 6 से 7 हम कर रहे हैं, अपनी को हमने 8 पे रखा है, and now the new power structure will end up with 21 points of power. So that means with empowerment, the total power of the company increases. Similarly, जब हम इन्हें empower करते हैं, say we empower them to this level, इनकी भी वही पावर रहेगी, इनकी भी वही रहेगी, so 4 will be converted into a 6, and this 21 will become 23. So this mathematical or arithmetical illustration tells you that empowerment in or power in organization is not a zero sum game. इसलिए empowerment इतनी ज़्यादा important है, क्योंकि अगर हम पावर को अपने पास दबा के रखें या हम एम्पावरमेंट ना प्रॉपर तरीके से करें लोगों की, तो फिर हम कंपनी की टोटल पावर ऑफ द कंपनी विल मीन द टोटल मसल ऑफ दैट कंपनी. क्योंकि ये पावर सिर्फ पॉलिटिकल पावर तो नहीं, जितनी कंपनी के अंदर मसल होगा, पावर होगी, उतना उसका इन्फ्लुएंस होगा एनवायरनमेंट. और एनवायरनमेंट में कौन है? एनवायरनमेंट में कंज्यूमर्स हैं, एनवायरनमेंट में आपके बाकी स्टेक होल्डर. सो मोर पावर ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन will actually translate into more prominent position or more prominent presence for that particular company, which means more business opportunities for that particular company. So through empowerment, we are not only building a culture, we are also increasing the chances of profitability and more prominent position or market share for that company. So therefore, empowerment concept को आप एक तो प्योरली इंडिविजुअल सेंस में लेते हैं एम्पावर करने को, लेकिन व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट एम्पावरमेंट इन ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल सेंस, देन प्लीज रिमेंबर दैट पावर इज स्कैटर्ड अराउंड इन ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस. एंड जब आप किसी एक की पावर को बढ़ाते हैं, नॉट एट द एक्सपेंस ऑफ अदर्स, क्योंकि पॉलिटिकल गेम्स में ये होता है, व्हेन वी आर प्लेइंग पॉलिटिकल गेम्स, देन वी आर स्ट्रेंथनिंग वन पर्सन एट द एक्सपेंस ऑफ अनदर. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, एक साहब हैं, उनके पास 3 डिपार्टमेंट हैं, एक डिपार्टमेंटल हेड को वो स्ट्रॉन्ग किए जा रहे हैं, एक को वीक किए जा रहे हैं. तो वो जो उन तीनों की स्ट्रेंथ मिलेगी बात वहीं की वहीं रहेगी। उन साहब की अपनी पावर जो है वो एज चेयर ऑफ दैट डिपार्टमेंट और हेड ऑफ दैट कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ 3 डिपार्टमेंट्स, उनकी अपनी पावर वहीं की वहीं रही। सो एम्पावरमेंट इज द नोशन ऑफ गिविंग एम्प्लॉइज द पावर, द फ्रीडम and information to make decisions and participate fully in the organization. Why firms adopt empowerment? That is the question. इसमें एक तो इस क्वेश्चन को रेज करने से पहले ही I have provided you the answer. Because empowerment increases the total muscle or total power of that company. Generally जो दूसरी reasons हैं जिसकी वजह से empowerment को अपनाया जाता है, उसमें एक तो ये है, empowerment is adopted as a strategy to improve products and services. अब इसमें आप सोचेंगे, why would empowerment improve products and services? Because when we empower people, then we give them more freedom, we give them more information and knowledge, so we improve their skills, we improve their ability to make decisions, we improve their knowledge, so we are enhancing their mental capacities. We are giving them more resources, we are giving them more skills, so we are making them better employees. And when we improve our employees, our productivity, our products, our services will improve, because products and services are not made by one group or one person. They are an outcome of the combined efforts of many, many people. So when we are empowering many people, then we are giving those people more skills and more freedom to act. So they will act on time and they will act with full force. Therefore, our organization will not lag behind the competition, will be very responsive to customers. So that is why we will have an empowerment strategy. So that is one reason. The other reason is because other firms in the industry are doing the same. That is also a very genuine reason, because when the competition is doing it, when other companies are doing it, when all the industry is doing it, then like what happened in 90s in our country, that people got ISO 9000 certification not because of quality consciousness, but because the other companies are getting it. So ये भी एक pressure है, ये भी एक reason. And the other reason is to create a unique learning organization with superior performance capabilities. एक तो ये कि आप दूसरों की देखा देखी आपने भी empowerment को अपना लिया, लेकिन अगर आप एक learning organization create कर रहे हैं, वहां पर you cannot exist without empowerment. जब तक आप लोगों को empower नहीं करेंगे, आप वो learning organization का मकसद जो पूरा करना चाह रहे हैं, and that is to learn from your mistakes, will not happen. Because if people are not empowered, they will not make decisions. They will depend on their top level for making decisions. So जब वो decision ही नहीं करेंगे, तो कोई mistake ही नहीं होगी at that level, कोई idea ही generate नहीं होगा, उस level पे कोई discussion ही नहीं होगी, तो फिर innovation कहाँ से आएगी? So you see, empowerment actually motivates people, because whenever people are provided freedom, whenever they are recognized as human beings and as intelligent human beings, they respond. And when you try to control them as machines, or when you try to control them as just entities which are there to work like robots, then obviously you cannot motivate them intrinsically. And unless and until you strike their motivation chord somewhere hidden in their personalities, you cannot take the best out of them. Yes, you might take the average from them. They might give you the average potential or the average output which they can. They might not strive for the best, because they will only do that if they are internally motivated to do. So empowerment is phenomena which is spreading very quickly. Empowering employees basically means giving them 4 elements. And those 4 elements enable them to act more freely and accomplish their jobs more independently. And that is why the time which is lost in taking approvals, in depending on others, in taking guidance, in asking, it is not that in learning organization people don't ask, they ask, but they don't ask for the sake of getting an approval. They ask for the sake of sharing knowledge, for the sake of increasing their own knowledge base. So there are many questions in learning organizations, but those questions give people more information. So जो चार एलिमेंट हमने कहे empowerment में, the employees के लिए the first element which they receive is information. Information about company performance. अब देखिए information बहुत सी हैं जो एक आम कंपनी में जो लर्निंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नहीं है या जहाँ पर empowerment को अपनाया नहीं गया, वहाँ पर बहुत सी इंफॉर्मेशन एम्प्लॉइज के पास नहीं होती. For example, people sitting in marketing department will have no information of what is happening in production department. Production department की problems क्या हैं? क्यों वो product time पे नहीं बना सकते? Marketing will only complain about it. Sales will only complain about it. But if they have information about the details of production operations and the problems which the production people are facing, then their complaints will decrease. इसी तरह अगर एम्प्लॉइज को इंफॉर्मेशन हो कि हमारी कंपनी कैसा परफॉर्म कर रही है फाइनेंशियली, यूजुअली ये इंफॉर्मेशन उनको नहीं दी जाती बिकॉज of many reasons, because of maybe tax reasons or financial reasons, I don't know, but there are many reasons that the financial information is withheld. अगर employees को वो information भी provide की जाए, which is the latest trend, notion is called open book style of management, where the top management shares its financial information with the employees. The studies and the experiments have shown that sharing financial information and sharing information about the performance of the company increases the motivation level of the employees because they are in picture now. देखें, आप भी अगर इसको प्योरली अपने ऊपर इंडिविजुअली अप्लाई करें, अपनी फैमिली लेवल पे अप्लाई करें कि आपकी फैमिली के जो बड़े लोग हैं, व्हेन दे टेक ए डिसीजन, तो वो आपको उसमें इन्वॉल्व करते हैं या नहीं करते. अगर वो आपको इन्वॉल्व करते हैं, आपको इंफॉर्मेशन देते हैं चीजों की, यू विल फील बेटर. एंड इफ यू आर नॉट टोल्ड अबाउट व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इन योर फैमिली और व्हाट इज गोइंग टू हैपन, देन यू फील लेफ्ट आउट. यही सिचुएशन हम, ह्यूमन नेचर है हमारी, यही सिचुएशन जब हम कंपनीज में जाते हैं, वहां पर भी हमारी एक्सपेक्टेशन यही होती है कि हमें इन्वॉल्व किया जाए फैसलों में, डिसीजंस में, राय लेने में, ओपिनियन जनरेट करने में, हमें भी इन्वॉल्व किया जाए. जब हमें इन्वॉल्व किया जाएगा, देन वी विल स्टार्ट टेकिंग इंटरेस्ट. क्योंकि अब हो सकता है हमारी ओपिनियन के ऊपर कोई फैसला कर लिया जाए. दैट मीन्स नाउ वी आर गिवन इंपॉर्टेंस. सो गिविंग इंफॉर्मेशन टू पीपल motivates them, and that is one of the functions of empowerment. The other element of empowerment is that employees have more knowledge and skills to contribute to company goals. Empowerment will be useless if people are not given knowledge and skills, because if you have an assistant and that assistant does not obviously have the skills and knowledge of your level, and you ask him to do your work from tomorrow, that is not empowerment. Empowerment में ये है कि you first train him, you first bring him to your level, not academically, but knowledge-wise, skills-wise. You give him the skills, you train him, and then you give him the decision-making power. Now, since you have given him skills, you have given him knowledge, he is now in a position to take or make that decision which you were making. So जब वो आपके जगह के डिसीजन बनाने शुरू हो जाएंगे, फिर ये नहीं है कि आप फ्री हो जाएंगे. Then you will start doing something which your bosses were doing. This is how the total power of the company increases. This is how the increase in knowledge of the employees creates further opportunities for every employee. So जब हम लोगों को knowledge और skills देते हैं, तो हम उन्हें motivate भी कर रहे होते हैं, हम उनको ज्यादा अच्छा equip कर रहे होते हैं for making decisions. And decision making in a learning organization is actually sowing the seeds of a strategy. Decision सिर्फ ये तो नहीं है कि आपने कितना रॉ मटेरियल लेना है या कितने चैनल की आपने लेंथ या ब्रेड्थ रखनी है। डिसीजन तो ये भी है कि ये छोटा सा जो स्टिच लगना है प्रोडक्ट पे, ये कहाँ लगेगा, पैकेजिंग कैसे होगी, पैकेजिंग मटेरियल को किस तरह मिनिमाइज किया जा सकता है, कॉस्ट मिनिमाइज किया जा सकता है, किस तरह उसकी ड्यूरेबिलिटी को इम्प्रूव किया जा सकता है। ये सारी चीजें हर वक्त कंपनीज में कोई डिबेट तो नहीं कर रहा होता फॉर्मली, इनफॉर्मल डिबेट चल रही होती, और ये वो इनफॉर्मल डिबेट्स हैं जहां से वो स्ट्रेटजी के सीड्स टॉप मैनेजमेंट विल पिक, नॉट एट रैंडम, ये उन तक जाएंगे। बीच में मिडिल मैनेजमेंट विल प्ले द रोल ऑफ आइडिया चैंपियंस, एंड दिस इज हाउ द स्ट्रेटजी विल start getting emerged. So knowledge and skills is also an important element of empowerment. The third important element of empowerment is that employees now have the power to make important decisions. पहले उनके पास पावर ही नहीं थी। पावर का मतलब अथॉरिटी नहीं। Please don't take me wrong. When I say employees have more power, that does not mean that they have been given more authority. No, they have more power because they have more information and because they have more knowledge. Knowledge is power and information is power. So anybody who has got more information and more knowledge than before is now more powerful, because now he can make decisions with a clarity of thought which he could not have done when he had less power, less knowledge and less information. Now he is equipped with skills, now he is trained, now he has what it takes to do that job, so he will deliver because of the information and the knowledge combination is giving him the power to make important decisions. And the fourth element why employees respond to empowerment is that employees, it is not that they are only informed and given knowledge and given power, but that employees are rewarded based on company performance. That is the most important element of empowerment, which mostly the companies forget. They say, okay, we have enlarged the job of our employees. We involve them in decision making. We take their opinion. We encourage them to speak. लेकिन क्या करें जी, ये तो कोई आइडिया ही नहीं देते। मीटिंग्स पे बुलाओ तो ये बोलते ही नहीं। इनको हम नॉलेज स्किल्स पे ट्रेनिंग पे भेजना चाहते हैं, ये कोई इंटरेस्ट ही शो नहीं करते। ये ट्रेनिंग्स कंप्लीट करके आ जाते हैं और इनकी जॉब पे, इनके काम पे कोई फर्क ही नहीं पड़ता। प्रोडक्टिविटी वैसी की वैसी। एंड द टॉप मैनेजमेंट स्टार्ट्स फीलिंग कि ये ट्रेनिंग्स का, नॉलेज देने का, इंफॉर्मेशन देने का कोई फायदा नहीं। बट दे फॉरगेट that people are, yes, they are motivated internally when we share information with them, when we give them knowledge, when we give them skills, but there is another facet of motivation, and that is the external motivation. Why people come to work? People don't come to work for the sake of having good time. People don't come to work for the sake of having fun alone. Yes, fun, good time is part of work, but basically when we go somewhere as professionals to work, we are there because we will get some financial reward. We'll get some reward. जब आप लोगों को इंफॉर्मेशन दे रहे हैं, नॉलेज दे रहे हैं, पावर दे रहे हैं और रिवॉर्ड में उनको शामिल नहीं कर रहे, then you are not giving them the full motivational impetus required to propel them forward. फिर आप उनको हाफ इनपुट्स दे रहे हैं, तो जो रिजल्ट होगा वो भी हाफ होगा. But if we give them the full input of motivation by providing them opportunities to get motivated intrinsically as well as extrinsically, then we are creating an employee which will be motivated to work for the company. Because अब हमने employee performance को company performance के साथ tie in कर दिया है कि आप perform करें, which means when you perform then company will perform and you will be rewarded not only on the basis of your individual performance, but you will also get the reward from the company performance. If company has increased its profitability, you will get a share from it. You will get a reward from it on top of what you have done on as an individual employee. एक तो cost of living वगैरह तो ठीक है, आपकी increase हो रही, आपकी पर्सनल परफॉर्मेंस के ऊपर आपकी इंक्रीमेंट भी लग रही, लेकिन कंपनी की सक्सेस के साथ आपका शेयर है कि नहीं है, दैट इज द मेक और ब्रेक ऑफ involving people with that company or making those people fall in love with that company if you share your success with them. Hard times to share karna, obviously, then people will share hard time with you. लेकिन अगर आप अपनी सक्सेस उनसे शेयर नहीं करते और जब डाउन ट्रेंड आता है तो फिर आप कहते हैं जी अब आपकी तनख्वाहें लेट होंगी, अब आपकी तनख्वाहें कम हो जाएंगी, अब ले ऑफ शुरू हो जाएंगे, अब आपके बोनसेस रुक जाएंगे, अब आपका फलां रुक जाएगा, देन यू आर नॉट ट्रीटिंग योर एम्प्लॉयज एज योर फैमिली, देन यू आर ट्रीटिंग योर एम्प्लॉयज एज पीस ऑफ फर्नीचर. तो फिर जो रिस्पॉन्स आपको मिलेगी वो भी फिर पीस ऑफ फर्नीचर वाली रिस्पॉन्स होगी. देन डोंट एक्सपेक्ट पीपल टू give up their families and to give up their time and to give up their other activities for the sake of you, because you are giving them an average return and they will give you their average return. ये तो पॉसिबल नहीं है कि आप उन्हें फाइनेंशियली कुछ भी ना दें, रिवॉर्ड करें ना, कंपनी की परफॉर्मेंस में से कोई शेयर ना दें, कंपनी की परफॉर्मेंस के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन भी ना दें, एंड स्टिल एक्सपेक्ट दैट दीज पीपल विल ले देयर लाइफ फॉर यू. दैट कैन नॉट हैपन. And that does not happen. Therefore, empowerment को अगर ये चार के चार एलिमेंट्स पूरे मौजूद हैं तो फिर हम कह सकते हैं कि ये कंपनी इज यूजिंग एम्पावरमेंट. अदरवाइज एम्पावरमेंट के लिए वर्ड तो एम्पावरमेंट ही यूज होता है, बट एक्चुअली व्हाट इज हैपनिंग अंडर दैट एम्पावरमेंट इज डेलीगेशन ऑफ वर्क. और आई एम जिसकी एग्जाम्पल है, I'm not saying that it happens in 100% of public organizations, लेकिन जनरली पब्लिक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में अगर आप एम्पावरमेंट का कॉन्सेप्ट देखें तो वहां जो टॉप पे साहब बैठे हैं या जो भी साहब बहादुर बैठे हैं उन्हें एम्पावरमेंट ऐसे ही लगेगी कि मैं अपना काम उठा के नीचे के वालों को दे दूं, तो ये तो एम्पावरमेंट होगी. दिस इज नो एम्पावरमेंट, बिकॉज द क्वालिटी ऑफ वर्क विल नाउ स्टार्ट सफरिंग. व्हेन वी डोंट ट्रेन दोज पीपल, व्हेन वी डोंट गिव देम इंफॉर्मेशन, व्हेन वी डोंट गिव देम एनी नॉलेज, and we give them additional work, we are further demotivating them. And we are further compromising on the quality of overall product or the service which we are producing. Public sector में accountability standards different हैं. Public sector में appraisal systems in our country are different. लेकिन in private sector of our company, the situation is different. Over here, you cannot delegate your work to others and say that, okay, I am not coming tomorrow, you do my job, you are empowered. And that is a very distorted face of empowerment. That is disfiguring or distorting empowerment to get a benefit of using that term empowerment and actually delegating your own work to others. So empowerment में और delegation में ये important difference है. इसको as an employee भी याद रखें, as a boss भी याद रखें. As an employee इसलिए because nobody falsely empowers you. And as a boss, because you don't demotivate your people. It's not that you ethical or unethical debate तो है, लेकिन it boils down to pure motivation levels. If you do it to your friends, if you try to be their boss without giving them an equal share in your bounties or rewards, you will not retain your friends. So फिर how can you retain a bunch of the employees which are working day and night for you, and you are not sharing information with them, you are not giving them knowledge, you are not making them powerful, and on top of everything, you are not rewarding them properly. So ये इसलिए empowerment के जो elements हैं और empowerment का जो concept है, that again works very well in organizations which are horizontal, which are flat, which are towards learning organizations. So, today, what we have discussed is the various structural designs available for global companies to use. अब structural design में हमने global product structure देखा, global matrix structure देखा, transnational model देखा, and it is not that companies will decide, okay, let's start using a global matrix structure or a global product structure. It will depend on their strategy. Whether they are using a full-fledged globalization strategy, which means that they want to grow global with a standardized product, or they want to have global operations with a domestic touch. Imagine, I can't take any names obviously, but imagine a huge fast food company which is giving a standardized product across the world using nearly the same advertising strategy and the same product making techniques, and they are using a strategy of globalization. But if that particular company also starts catering to the local cuisines of a country, for example, when they are in Pakistan and they start taking care of the spicy tastes which people like here, or the huge quantities of food which we consume, or if they are in France, they start taking into account things like not giving people an orange juice in the breakfast, or in some other countries like India, for example, the vegetarian tastes and the availability of a huge market which can be given the vegetarian or vegetable products. जब आप इन चीज़ों को मद्देनज़र रखना शुरू करते हैं अपनी global strategy में, then your focus is multi-domestic. Because now you're focusing on regions, on countries, according to their local tastes. Not just, you're not providing them a standardized product. So ये कब आप globalization strategy ज़्यादा use करेंगे, कब आप multi-domestic focus रखेंगे, that we have already discussed. And we have seen that we will actually gauge and monitor the national responsiveness or the domestic forces and the global integration forces. इनका mix हम देखेंगे. Whether we are catering to a situation where the national responsiveness forces are very high or whether the global integration forces are high. और दोनों high हैं या दोनों low हैं या various combinations हैं, so we use a mix of globalization and multi-domestic strategy. And that is why in the 4 quadrants which came out of that framework, in one quadrant we had an international strategy, in the other we had a pure globalization strategy with a pure global metric structure, globalization and multi-domestic with global metric structure, international organization, international strategy or export strategy with an international division. So ये changes हमारी जो हैं ये depend करेंगी how much standardized we are or we want to become. If we want to retain some local touches, then we are using a multi-domestic strategy. And then we talked about the transnational model which tries to, which has an endeavor to take us beyond the constraints of global matrix and which puts us very close towards a learning organization. So एक छोटी flat horizontal organization के जो concept हैं, जब हम उन्हें apply करते हैं to huge international big and complex operations, when we try to control those through clan controls, when we empower people rather than trying to control them through hierarchies, then we are trying to create a large learning organization. And learning organization will only be sustained when and if we empower our people. And that is why we discussed empowerment in some detail. We talked about its definition. We talked about the 4 elements required to empower people. We will continue with our discussion in the next session. Till then, it is Khuda Hafiz. Thank you very much.